Hello, today we're going to have a look at the Havilland Chipmunk in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So this just came out over the last couple of days and I thought we'd go and have a fly with it from Booker Airfield in Buckinghamshire. So excuse me. So yeah, this is the Havilland Chipmunk. It was a trainer used in the 1940s and 50s and actually was used for decades in the RAF in the UK as the first trainer that many pilots ever flew. It's made by Aeroplane Heaven in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The only downer I would say is it's quite expensive for what it is, but it is absolutely modelled wonderfully. If we go and look carefully at the pilots and look around the aircraft, it's really modelled nicely. So if we go and jump inside, you can see the modelling inside is exceptional as well. So let's go and have a look around and see what we need to do to get this started. There aren't actually many switches to deal with in a de Havilland Chipmunk. It's a very basic aircraft. So just before we get started, let's go and try the views out. So if we hold the control key down, press 1, we get a view of the compass. Press 2, and we get to see the comm radios, ADF and VHF there. Press 3, and we get to see a very close-up view of the artificial horizon. Press 4 and we get to see the fuel tank gauge. Press 5 and we get to see over the nose boss. Press 6 and we're looking kind of across the left side of the nose. Press 7, we look across the right side of the nose. Press 8, we're looking out over the right wing. 9 is back in the center and 0 is not doing anything. Okay, so press F and we will center back up in the middle of the front cockpit. Okay, so let's go and get this thing ready for flight. So first thing we're going to do is change the mixture to rich. You can see our lever down here for the brakes. Let's just make sure our mappings are working. So when the brakes are on, the lever is lifted. On the other side of the cockpit, we should find the throttle is around. Oh, sorry, throttle is on the left side. So there's the throttle. If we look over here, we should see the lever for the flaps. So we push it forwards to engage flaps, or in other words, we're pulling the lever to pull the flaps down underneath the wing. Okay, so everything's very mechanical and very obvious. So obviously we can stir the stick around. So if we go and look outside, we'll just make sure those mappings are correct. So we've got the ailerons, we've got the elevators, and we've got the rudder. Okay, so notice it is a tail dragger, so we're going to have to steer with the rudder for the most part and the tail wheel, which is sprung. Okay, we have the fuel, whether it's on or off, so we'll turn the fuel on. We'll turn the magnetos on. We will turn this knob here all the way around. And we will turn this down to ground down here. So this is basically power. And then you've got the lever down here. And then we can get to start the engines. So the engine starter is behind this safety cover and it's a cable you pull. So if I'm just going to advance the throttle slightly before we do this. Again, I've not followed a checklist, I'm following my nose here, so we'll see if this works. More by luck than judgment. Okay, so engine is running, so we can reduce the revs back a little bit and see if it will die if we pull it back to idle. No, it's happily chugging away. So now we get to change this back to flight mode on this lever, and we can go and turn on our identification lights and our nav lights, our taxi lights, and off we go. So I'm just going to move the mouse. So if we press F, it's worth pointing out the default view is quite off-putting. It's down and into the nose of the aircraft, which seems a bit wrong until you actually look outside and you notice the pilot is absolutely crammed into this aircraft. So, you know, when you're looking forwards in the real thing, you're going to have to look down on your chest basically to see any instruments. So that's not outlandish. Although, you know, we're used to in Flight Simulator getting a view of the instruments and the view outside. So we can cheat to a certain extent for a two-dimensional screen. Obviously, if you had a headset on, then you could easily look around the cockpit. Okay, so we're going to advance the flaps to takeoff position. And we're going to remove the wheel brakes and advance the throttle. And we're rolling. So we're going to steer out. And I have to say, ground handling with this is wonderful. Remembering it's a tail dragger as well, it's remarkably benign. And they do actually make notes in the documentation of the aircraft that they have actually, you know, put extra effort into making the ground handling work nicely, because the ground handling of tail draggers in Flight Simulator is notoriously bad usually. So let's have a look at it from outside as we taxi along into the runway. So we're going to depart on runway 24 at Booker, and we'll just go and fly a short circuit to see how it works. And you can very much see from the shape of this aircraft it's of its time. It's got kind of late 30s, early 40s written all over it, hasn't it? The sound modelling, as you can hear, is fantastic. Okay, so let's open the throttle. I'm having to give quite a lot of right stick to offset torque from the engine, but that's reducing as we pick up speed. The wind has got underneath the wing. We've got a bit of a crosswind going on here as well. So it's a bit of a handful to hold in a straight line, but that just needs a bit of practice. So we're airborne. Flaps up. Pull the throttle back so we're not at max throttle the whole time. You can see instruments are very rudimentary, let's put it that way. This is from quite an early part of the world. We didn't correct the barometric pressure, which I've just done, and we didn't check the compass either, but it looks to be okay. Okay, so let's have a look around. So we're flying out broadly on the runway direction. So we're going to turn to 60 degrees and fly the reciprocal of the runway direction. Just as we climb out, and we'll continue climbing. So you've got a vertical speed indicator. It's huge. We've got indicated airspeed, we've got RPM, altitude, clock, and side slip indicator, which isn't unusual for aircraft of this era, because they quite often didn't want to go the direction they were pointing. And you can do it in this although I've had a quick fly in this before recording this, and it is remarkably stable. So we'll have a look at that now while we're just flying along. We're coming up to 80 knots. So let's go and put some rudder input in and flick it from side to side. So you can see the wings, the advancing wing does gain more lift, so it lifts as you induce yaw. But you can see the actual aircraft is very, very benign. So we'll just climb a little bit more. So we're coming up to 2,500 feet. So I'm going to cut the throttle and see how the aircraft behaves in the stall. So I'm feeding in more and more backstick, more and more and more, and we've dropped a wing. Okay, so I'm just going to level out. Obviously we're picking up speed back to 80 knots in the dive. Open the engine to full throttle, and we can climb at 1,000 or 2,000 feet a minute. And it will hold on to that fairly, hold on to 1,000 feet a minute, certainly, look. Maybe about 800 feet a minute. So yeah, the stall characteristics are very, very placid. It doesn't tumble. But that, I don't know if that's down to Flight Simulator or the aircraft itself. I would suspect that's Flight Simulator that's not letting it tumble, because there's a big message here about spin recovery, but I haven't managed to get it to spin uncontrollably yet. So I haven't managed to enter into a spin and let go and it continue rotating on its own, it tends to right itself. Okay, so let's have a look around while we're flying. As I said, it sounds absolutely wonderful. And there's some really nice touches, like the pilots with their flight suits on. As you can see, as you pan around the aircraft, the sound changes. It gets the whole Doppler shift from the engines. It's really nicely done. Okay, so should we turn back in and approach into Booker? So let's pull the engine back to idle. Let's have a look outside. There's the airfield. Airfield's over there. So as we approach Booker, let's do some side slipping to see if we can descend and lose speed. So you can see, look, we've entered the side slip with hard left rudder and the speed is falling off and we are descending fast. That is absolutely great. So it responds to side slipping. So that becomes a really useful tool in your armoury for descending quickly. Yeah, so we can almost go nose down in the side slip and just keep an eye on the indicated airspeed. Obviously you can keep the nose up to not go too fast, but look how fast this thing can go. I'll have to check the stats on it to see what it can do in a dive. Just out of interest, if we open the throttle up, because we're quite some way out yet. So let's get to 100 knots and let's go for an aileron roll. So the nose drops quite a lot during the aileron roll. That's why I lifted it on the way in. But it's, you know, it's entirely predictable. We could go for a loop as well, I guess. So get some speed up. 120 knots. Go for the top. Through underneath. Just do it in a very consistent, gradual way. Yeah, it works absolutely fine. So it's very, very consistent and stable and easy to fly, dare I say. So I think the Scottish Aviation Bulldog may have some competition for me in what I might be flying a lot of the time. So I've gone for full flaps now. This is a fixed gear aircraft, so we don't have to worry about lowering the undercarriage. You can see I've got a crosswind going on here. So we're just balancing the airspeed on the way in. We could sit up in the cockpit if we want by pressing space. You can see there's a glass bubble above us, which is fine. We're at tick over. You have to remember that there is no stall warning in this aircraft, so you have to go by feel if the wings are about to drop. So you have to be quite mindful of that. So I'm probably going a bit fast. So we'll just stay above the runway and let's see what happens as it floats down. So it slowly lost lift right at the end there, didn't it? And descended rather quickly. That's fine. Okay. So flaps up. Let's get off the runway, taxi back on the grass. And you can hear the grass, which is wonderful. We'll taxi down the grass runway alongside. Grass taxiway, I should say. See, it moves around, it feels very, very alive. It's great fun to fly. Obviously there's no nav radio in this aircraft, so no autopilot either, so it's hand flying. It's a trainer at the end of the day, It was used for RAF pilots for their first experience, really, of flying an aircraft. But it's very, very stable for manoeuvring around on the ground. So if we sit back down, actually, we might stay sat up actually, because then at least we can see where we're going. But we'll do this from the outside view. It's got quite a throaty engine noise, doesn't it? It's very impressive. Where shall we park? This is the custom Booker or Wickham Air Park scenery, by the way, which is very, very good in Flight Simulator. It's not too expensive either. So if you need a nice airfield to do general aviation operations from, I would absolutely recommend the Booker Airfield scenery or Wickham Air Park. Let's just double back on ourselves. Actually, should we go for 27 over there, because there's a couple of ground staff there to help us out. Let's go and have a look around inside. Of course, we can't actually see him, so we'll lean out of the window. See, what we could actually do is open the canopy and then simulate kind of leaning out. There we go. So wheel brakes on, sit back in the middle, and again to drain the engine of fuel you just move the mixture to lean, engine runs out of fuel and dies, which is absolutely fine. And then go and turn the power off. Obviously we can turn the magnetos off, turn the lights off, and then turn the power off there, and we're good to go. So there we go, that was the Havilland Chipmunk in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you can see there the flight crew of the obviously the RAF trainee pilots. The modelling of them is fantastic. The overall modelling of the aircraft is fantastic as well, I would say. So if you want a general aviation trainer to go and fly around in that is of this era, you can't go far wrong with this. Like I said, it is quite expensive for what it is. So I don't know whether it's worth waiting to see if the price comes down at some point. But yeah, it's the Aeroplane Heaven, the Havilland Chipmunk in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, and I'll see you again soon.